Hello, I would like to welcome you in the One Year with the Ramchal series, where we are discussing about the parasha. And here we arrive to this weekly portion that is Bo. אוקיי? כי פעם הזאת אני שלח את כל מגפי אל לבדך לעבדך ומעמך בעבור תדע כי אין כמוני בכל הארץ. For I will this time send all my plagues upon the person, and upon the servants, and upon the people, that through mayest know that there is no one like me in all earth. We see that the hail plagues appears to be the last plague. Okay, this is the eighth one exactly, and before the God redeemed the Jewish people, this is also coming out of the text. However, we know that this wasn't the last one, right? ואולם בעבור זאת בעמודתך בעבור הרותך את כוח למען סיפר שמי בכל הארץ. But in very deed for this cause may I have made thee to stand to show thee my power, and my name may be declared through all the earth. It was very important for God that the Egyptians experienced the hail plague, because we are talking about a very unique and supernatural affliction. When faced with the unprecedented, incredible things, we began to contemplate and underlying the force beyond the nature that operates the system. Thus, the Egyptian could marvel the power of God, and the bow section begins with the God telling Moses that this won't be the last plague after all. 3 more plagues were expected, indicated by the section's name, that is bow, which has a value of 3, since we have Bet and Aleph. Bet is 2, Aleph is 1. So 3 additional plagues will occur. ויאמר השם אל משה, בוא אל פרעה, כי אני מקבדתי את לבו ואת לב עבדיו, למען שתהיה אותות אלה בקרבו. The Lord said unto Moses, go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, that I might show these my signs in the midst of them. Okay, למען שתי אותות. Okay, these my signs. The otot, the ot is singular, meaning sign, and otot meaning plural, that having more signs. So we already mentioned that more 3 plagues are here to come, and that we know that more 3 other signs needed in order that is the reason we find a plural form. Okay, so it is implying the same thing. And here, when we're going ahead, there's going to be another plague, that is the darkness. ויאמר השם אל משה, נטע ידיך על השמיים, ויהיה חושך על הארץ מצרים, וימש חושך. And Lord said unto Moses, stretch out the land toward the heaven, that may have be darkness over the land of Egypt, even darkness which may be felt. ויט משה את ידו את השמיים, ויהיה חושך אפלה בכל הארץ מצרים 3 ימים. And Moses stretched forth his hands toward heaven, and there was thick darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. So Moses now had to bring the next plague, the darkness, to the Egyptians. White light with dawn for the Jews. So with this plague, he had to approach a certain sephira of judgment, of Gura, which is very challenging him, we already mentioned. So he directed the judgment, the Gura, toward the Egyptians, and the other for the Jewish people, radiating kindness, Hesed. Okay, this is something very comfortable for him, but the judgment is not, because Moses is not related to this Sephirah of Gura. Therefore, as the verse says, he stretched out his hands towards heaven, al Shamayim, and basically Shamayim, it is Shin Mem Yud Mem Sofit. It is made up of 2 words. One is Esh, fire, that represents judgment. The other is Mayim, water, represents kindness. So these both were necessary to execute the plague of darkness, to understand really this plague of the darkness. And we have to delve into the deeper layers. what darkness and light is. It is, we have to go in the beginning of the creation. וירא אלוקים את האור כי טוב ויבדיל אלוקים בין אור ובין החושך. And God saw the light that was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. So the light is associated basically with the goodness and the holiness, while the darkness is linked to the evil and the impurity. So these opposites exist separately and cannot be mixed. So we have the light and we have the darkness. They are distinct. So God withdrew the holy and the good, and that is resulted the darkness itself. According to the sages, when Egyptians were in the darkness, the Jews were granted the opportunity to reclaim their valuables taken from them previously. Another argument is that during the plague of darkness, when it was impossible to see, okay, the wicked people also met their fate. So God executed justice over their life. Basically, they died at this point. Also meaning part of the Jewish people that they died, that they weren't eligible to be redeemed. So those people died at the point of the darkness. So the plague of darkness proves a crucial affliction as during this exile of Egypt. So darkness and light become intervened. As we mentioned earlier, it is not good that darkness and light become mixed. So therefore, the removal of evil individuals from this society ensured that afterward only the light remained. דבר נא באזני העם וישאלו איש מעט רעהו ואישה מעט רעותה, כלי כסף וכלי זהב. So speak now in the ears of people and let them ask every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. It is very interesting. So how the Torah indirectly details how the Jewish people should take their valuables from the Egyptians back, and removing them from the forces of evil. So every man of his neighbor and every woman of her neighbor. So man with man and woman with woman. So okay, so we are going to focus on it. So the Jews left the Holy Land and descended in Egypt, where their descendants were born. Okay, the Jews lived in various separate districts and didn't mingle with the Egyptians, nor the Egyptians didn't want to mingle with them. And we can see, even in this case, it is noted that the valuables were exchanged between the same man and woman between women. So this to avoid any physical contact between the sexes. Another interesting aspect is that this expression starts with daber now, so speak now. So why does God request rather than command, right? So earlier he promised basically Abraham that his descendants would be in exile for 400 years, since all people knew, but afterward that they wouldn't leave Egypt. The suit that God reminds the Jews that don't forget this, urging them to take the good that promised to Abraham. So these valuables that they belong to them. So this way, how the promise is going to be fulfilled. So the liberation from slavery results in the separation of the kedusha, the holiness, and the tuma of impurity, just as God created in the beginning, as we mentioned earlier. Everything basically returns to the proper path. But there is things are going to be a little different. So let's see how. ויאמר משה, גם אתה תיתן בידינו זבחים ועולות ועשינו להשם אלוקינו. And Moses said, we must also give into our hands sacrifices and burnt offering, that we might sacrifice unto the God them. וגם מקננו ילך עמנו, לא תישאר פרסה, כי ממנו ניקח לעבוד את השם אלוקינו, ואנחנו לא נדע מה נעבוד את השם עד בינו שמע. Our cattle also shall go with us, there shall not a hoof be left behind, for therefore we must take to serve God. And we know how with that we must serve God until we come thither. So Moses tells Pharaoh that the Jews are only willing to leave with their livestock, with their ships. So why mention that not a single animal will be left behind? So this basically further infuriates Pharaoh. Why it is happening this beneficial now? So this is the question. It is precisely the reason because the plague of darkness that Pharaoh was almost broken and allowed the Jews to leave Egypt. Thus, the last plague was almost avoided, right? So couldn't manifest it. So its execution became uncertain. So Moses complicates and the previous conditions and hardens and adds to that they will also take the animals and the livestock with them. So Pharaoh's anger overrides basically his fear. So he was more angry than to be afraid. Then his heart is going to be hardened. ויחזק השם את לב פרעה ולא אבה ושלחם. But God hardened Pharaoh's heart and he would not let them go. Okay? So this was the result of it. So if the Jews leaving Egypt, then with them the Kedusha, the holiness, departs from Egypt as well. So when basically they are taking their animals, even with the klipa of the remaining Kedusha depart. So these animals that we belong to them is representing the klipa of the Kedusha. Okay, so by bringing the living possessions, the Jews not only reclaim the property, but also carry away these remnants of the Kedusha and the holiness from Egypt. ויאמר כי יהיה עמך, וזה לך האות, כי אנוכי שלחתי בהוצאתך את העם ממצרים תעבדון את האלוקים על ההר הזה. And he said, certainly I will be 3, and this shall be the token, and to 3 that I have sent thee when you has brought forth the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God upon this mountain. When they leave Egypt, the Jews will need to offer these sacrifices that we mentioned in earlier parasha. That since Moses couldn't really specify the exact number of animals required in the desert for this, he advised to take the maximum allowed number of the sheep and the animals. So Moses was basically a great diplomat and didn't guess or neither estimated, but carried the maximum of livestock, not allowing how many or how much they would be needed later. But he didn't have any detailed explanation by God that for the future events to come. So this illustrates that Moses' loyalty and faithfulness towards the Almighty and the conduct for divine manifestation following without even foreknowledge of the outcome. So his humility, that he's being anav, was one of his midah, one of his significant part. Okay, it's personal that we know. Okay, so Moses, it's this is what described in the Torah. Okay, and then we have one more plague that is the death of the firstborn. ויאמר השם אל משה, עוד נגע אחד אביא על פרעה ועל מצרים, אחרי כן ישלח אתכם מזה, כשלחו כלה, יגרוש אתכם מזה. And God said unto Moses, yet one plague more will bring upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go, and when the chariot to go shall surely thrust you on the hands altogether. So here we have another phrase here that od negea, one more plague, but it is general when we're mentioning plague, it is makkah. Okay. And now we have another word, it is naga. Naga meaning disease. Okay, according to the Sefer Yetzirah, it is not uh, uh, the better thing that oneg, it is meaning pleasure, and the verse then disease. Okay, so these are, we having here the same letters, Aleph, Ayin, Nun, Gimel, arranged in a different order, and there we have these contrary phrases. Okay, so as you can take this oneg, okay, that's meaning pleasure, it is this sequence, then it is made up of three words, like Ale, Ayin, like Eden, Nahar, kmo, Nun, kmo Nahar, and Gimel, kmo Gan. So Eden, the garden, Nahar is the river, as Gan is also the garden. So then we have to go back in the Bereshit on the creation, and we have a river here. שם אחד אחד פישון הוא הסובב את כל הארץ, החיבייה אשר שם הזהב. The name of the first Pishon, that is which compassed the world land of Havilah, where there is gold. So this is a very spiritual statement. Okay, simply put, it can be interpreted as a river that is one that nourishes the garden. And when everything is good and we have the abundant situation, then the garden is passes the power to the river. In this case, like Eden Nahar Gan, this is the sequence of the pleasure of the oneg, the good process. But when the evil force disturbs the spiritual process, Nahar, like withdraws the influence to nourish, so the river is not nourishing the garden. So without this, it is returning to its original source without giving, so that it's becoming the nega, the plague, the infection. So it couldn't execute its basic nature of giving, so it didn't become nourishing, this nourishing type of energy, and instead that it's becoming the nega, the plague. So the evil force, a bad power, is transforming this oneg, the pleasure, into nega. This is what happened at the plague of the firstborn. So the flow of energy, this cycle of life, didn't flow in. So this resulted that the souls of the firstborn not receiving the nourishment of the soul, that is led to the death of theirs. So this is precisely why the Torah uses the term oneg, okay, that is turned into nega, to plague. So following this, the liberation of the Jews, the redemption, people that the redemption after this plague, this is going to be the 10th one, and the Jewish people could leave Egypt. So what there is a difference. So we have the first 9 plagues, okay? And through that, even though this has caused a lot of difficulties for the Egyptians, that they still manage life, right? But however, the 10th plague, they become completely dysfunctional because every household had basically a firstborn. So everyone is involved with this. כשלחו כלה גרש יגרוש איתכם מזה. Okay, so we had here in the text, I already read it. Afterwards, we let you go hence, when shall yet you go, surely must go out of thence together. The text is literally mentioning this here, kala, okay? It is referring for the feminine aspect of the divine, that is the Shekhinah. So on the spiritual level, like Egypt is sending away the Shekhinah, and physically it sending away the Jewish people. So in the text you find the plural form of it, garosh higrosh, emphasizing that here that both meanings should be considered. Okay, so we have the spiritual of the Shekhinah goes, and also the Jewish people are going. Then we have few more things. ויקרא משה לכל זקני ישראל ויאמר עליכם משקו ויקחו לכם צאן למשפחותיכם Shachatu leha Pesach. Then Moses called for the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take your lambs um, according to your families and kill the Passover lamb. ולקחתם אגודת אזוב וטבלתם בדם אשר בסף והגעתם אל המשקוף ואל שתי מזוזות מן הדם אשר בסך ואתם לא תצאו איש מפתח ביתו עד בוקר. You shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it into the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel 2 sides both with the blood that is the basin, and none of you shall go out of the door of his house until the morning. So this previously presented sacrifice of the lamb was very important step it's part of the redemption. This was the number 0 step. So without this force, the evil were neutralized and ensured the salvation of the Jewish people. There are 4 levels basically of tuma, of impurity. So firstly, it is necessary to remove the impure things from the outermost shell, that is the klipot noga, which was achieved through the lamb sacrifice that was performed earlier. And then we have the other 3 that is remained. So therefore, this hyssop was dipped into the blood of lamb 3 times, corresponding to these remaining 3 levels of tumah. ויקם פרעה לילה הוא לכל עבדיו וכל מצרים ותהי צעקה גדולה במצרים כי אין בית אשר אין שם מת. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt for there was not a house where there was not one dead. So when the Almighty commanded the angel to execute this plague of the death upon the firstborn, the angels had to distinguish who would lose their life and who would be spared. So the Egyptian firstborns were marked for death, and while the Jewish firstborns were be alive. Therefore, it was necessary to dip this hyssop into the blood and to mark these doorposts. And the marking signified that case life for the Jewish doorpost. So here we're using the blood and the hyssop, and that was the signing of this likeness at that point. So what happened during this darkness? לי שימורים הוא לי השם להוציאה מארץ מצרים הוא הלילה הזה לחשם שימורים לכל בני ישראל דרותם. It was a night of watching unto the gods for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This night is a night of watching into the God for all the children of Israel through their generations. So this the exile is indicated by the term Laila, okay, night. But here we have in the text we have a missing hay that is representing for the divine presence of God. So when the redemption is not yet complete, and we are talking about, so we one point, the suffering of the Jewish people, so the divine presence cannot fully reveal itself, so it must remain concealed. Hence the term Laila. We have a hay that it's missing. The exile basically supposed to last for 400 years, but numerically it lasted for 210 years. The Jewish people suffered greatly, and it was a high time for the redemption. But from a perspective of the Shekhinah, they were not ready. The same verse hints at this only. It was a night of watching into God. So among the Jews, only those who were deemed were saved by the divine. It is really possible that if the entire 400 years of exile had been spent by the Jews in Egypt, then more souls could have been saved. So those individuals who another lifetime might have become better. So the darkness was the plague during which even those among the Jews who did not deserve to be saved would be invisibly removed from society. So their presence would have disturbed the perfection of their redemption. only those deemed first by the divine were saved to receive the Torah later on. Okay, so that was for today. Thank you for your attention, and see you next week. Bye bye.